And I'm just going to say a little bit about BlockW for those of you who don't know who we are. We're a female-led network whose mission is to create awareness about blockchain and other emerging technologies and promote equity and diversity in its use and application. We foster inclusivity by helping to provide pathways and access to education, training and skills around blockchain and the frontier technologies. So, there's a bit of noise on. It's gone. Yeah. Today, we are delighted to be in conversation with a group of amazing women, entrepreneurs, innovators, investors, leaders, and our panel will be introduced to you by Bridget, but there, as you can see, there's Bridget herself, Sorsha, Sophie, Janna, and Dr. Jane Thompson. So we're really delighted to have this international group who are based in Australia, UK, Denmark, Ireland. So following today, our discussion with the panel and our audience, we're very pleased that the Minister with responsibility for financial services in the Department of Finance, Mr. Sean Fleming, will join us on video to give his closing address to Blockchain Ireland Week. Minister Fleming's closing remarks will leave us, I think, with a clear view of his department's intent to build financial services within the European framework with the help of frontier technologies like blockchain. But I would like to take this opportunity, if I may, to thank the Blockchain Ireland Week team for all their hard work. I'm sure they're absolutely exhausted and delighted that it's the end of the week. So well, Dara, Paul, Amber, and Marzine, it was a tremendous success, and I know you put an awful lot of work into it. Our focus today is timely. Digitalisation is the foundation of inclusion into our evolving networked and interconnected lives, from agriculture to healthcare to financial services. Tomorrow's and today's indeed strongest performing financial services are likely to find new value at the intersection of digital technologies and sustainability. Provided by these two engines of growth, we are 5 times more likely to outperform our peers. Our colleague and friend Sanjay Poddar from Accenture during the week said that that was 2.5 times pre-pandemic, but now post-pandemic, it's 5 times more likely. So it's not just the right thing to do, it is successful business. So digital financial inclusion is defined by the European Commission as the process of taking environmental, social and governance considerations into account when making investments decisions in the financial sector, leading to more long-term investments in sustainable economic activities and growth. This perspective resonates with our panel, who will discuss real-world projects. Our panel members are founders, inventors and advisors, and they are harnessing the power of blockchain and a variety of crypto protocols, digital assets, as well as other frontier technologies. Their work, and that of others, is pioneering and will fundamentally change how finance is traced, collected, and distributed among SMEs in emerging and developed economies, the unbanked and the underbanked through peer-to-peer networks. So we're absolutely delighted to be with you here today and to have Bridget as our moderator from the Bigger Pie. And the Bigger Pie is an organization founded on supporting women in blockchain and further technologies. So I'll hand over to you, Bridget, now to introduce our panel and to moderate the event. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joyce. Indeed, and you've covered a lot in terms of framing what we're going to be talking about. And I just want to say personally, I founded the Bigger Pie in 2019 because I saw the opportunity that this technology had to be able to change the way that we interact with each other, to change business models, and to be able to distribute global solutions. But having come into the industry in 2017, I saw incredible women in the space, but there's just not enough. And I think if we're going to be shaping our global futures, then we need everyone at the design, development, and the deployment table. So the Bigger Pie is very much focused in making sure that we have visibility of the women who are pioneering this space, like we have on this panel, that we can support them, that we can have conversations around getting these women funded. Because I was speaking to somebody yesterday, and I was actually recording on a podcast around investing into female founders, and we should be investing for diversity, not in spite of it. And this idea as well, sustainable finance, that often I think people seem to think it's either purpose or profits. Yet when you have a look at something like Kapoor Capital, they are a top quartile fund that has in their 102 companies at the last report, led by over 50% of women and people of colour. They're focused on addressing educational inequity, climate change, quality job creation for formerly incarcerated people, alternatives to predatory loans, and other critical inventions. And they've made more money than those who are just focusing on profit. So I'm really excited. I'm not going to take up any more of Carol's time, because it's everyone's time, because I want to hear from the panelists about what problems they identify, how they're solving them, and how the technology is allowing us to be able to radically change our business models and to, I think, to lead and be able to deliver on that new leadership. So, Sophie, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. And thanks very much for asking me to speak today. It's great to see so many familiar and new faces as well. So I'm Sophie Blackstad. I'm CEO of Hive Online. We're a Danish impact fintech company rolling out in sub-Saharan Africa with a community finance platform that's based on blockchain. We support the bottom of the pyramid communities of farmers, many of whom don't have access to technology, literacy, electricity, anything very much. And we help the whole community to get digitized by a community-based hub, which doesn't require everyone to have a device. So everyone can have an identity, a wallet, and build a digital history of their commercial activity without needing a phone. It's based on blockchain. We have a 3-token model, which is based around a stable coin. We also have a share token and a debt token. So we can manage relatively complex financial fund structures and transaction structures. But obviously all of this is non-transparent to the users, who just see it as money and lending and buying into the community that they're a member of. We started it for savings groups in Niger a couple of years ago, working with Care International, and as a consequence have built it for very high resilience with very, very low literacy, because Niger, for those of you who don't know, is the least developed country in the world. And we're now rolling out, we've got cooperatives in Mozambique, savings groups in Zambia and Uganda, and we're about to start working in Nigeria with returning refugees, helping them to build communities of farms there, and also in Kenya. And we will also be working on a project in Ireland with tokenomics. So that's, again, where the Irish connection comes for us, bringing our experience of working with communities of farmers to the Irish ecosystem. And as well as doing transactions and savings and things, we also do traceability and crop quality, building markets and helping farmers to get access to seamless markets, which is a problem in Africa, but I think it's a problem everywhere as well. In terms of the challenges we've faced, well, having to deal with customers who don't have access to things that we take for granted has been a big learning curve for us, but it's been, I think, very valuable for us because it's enabled us to really start building distributed infrastructure where there is no infrastructure. Another big learning is that some of the things that we thought would take 3 to 5 years to really get people excited about, are starting to happen now, partly because of COVID, because people are beginning to recognize the need for alternative financial structures and things like tokenized assets, which we were planning to do later on, we're now starting to deliver, like next month. So that's been a really exciting thing. One of the big challenges we face is actually just working with organizations in Africa, because things tend to be very slow. Technology can be quite behind the curve. The financial sector is very conservative, but at the same time very excited about the opportunity to reach customers that they literally can't see today. So it's a very different set of challenges to the typical ones here. Although, of course, regulation is always very high on the agenda, and managing in a way that is protecting customers and compliant with regulation. And of course, that's different from country to country. And, you know, with 5 countries more on the way, that's always a bit of a challenge. But I think one of the really key things that the technology has enabled us to do is to start to build the rails of a distributed economy where there is no infrastructure. And that, to me, is the really exciting thing about this technology. I spent most of my career building international banks for a living. And when this tech came along, I saw the opportunity to fill in the gaps where the big banks have really failed to reach.
Great.
I know that for each of you as panelists, we could spend a whole session just
I'll cut
questions.
that off.
I'd love to know more. Absolutely. Victoria, please, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Bridget. And thanks for the invitation to come and talk. So who am I? I am Victoria Thompson. I'm a lawyer by background and training. I've spent more than a decade, and we'll just leave it at that number, inside financial institutions, thinking about innovation inside those organizations and what that really means. And up until the global pandemic, I was quite happy in that role. And then I picked up a phone and answered a call from one of our other panelists, the delightful Janna Victoria, who is my partner in crime in a lot of things that I get up to. And we started a bit of a passion project, which has now turned into Aurora. And I am the founder and CEO of Aurora. And really, what is Aurora? Aurora is about creating and reinventing the future of money, about making sure money flows where it needs to go the most and has the most impact. It's about putting people and humanity at the center of every decision that organization makes and tackling the hardest business problems that we've got. It isn't a charitable institution. It's about exactly like what you've said. It's a good growth. It's a good growth company with profit that comes and flows back to where it needs to do the work that it needs to do. And so we're developing a distribution platform and our wallet, which is about financial inclusion, because there is a shockingly alarming number of people in this world that don't have access to financial systems, which has largely been addressed by Sophie in her introduction as well. And I mean, there are 1.3 million people in the UK that don't have access to any form of bank account. And we're a developed nation, supposedly. There are 1.7 billion globally. And as a result of the COVID pandemic, I mean, the World Bank estimate that another 150 million people will be pushed into poverty. And that's going to have a tremendous impact. So at Aurora, we really want to think about how do we help people deal with those situations? How do we get people that are homeless banked? How do we get the women that are fleeing domestic abuse and have been subject to coercive control of their financial history into a safe space and have access to cash when they really need it? So we've come up with a nifty little way, courtesy of a little bit of money that we got from the UK government by their Sustainable Innovation Research Fund, to develop our wallet with NEM and leveraging the NEM symbol blockchain protocol and their tokens that they have, how we can create something that enables corporates to sponsor financial inclusion. So starting off with the charitable sector, if you imagine how charities like Big Issue and Refuge could support the people that they want to take care of and get into the right situation, how we can get them into the system and then into a place where they can develop good credit history. They can then develop access to systems and entitlement and benefits. Because right now, if you haven't got all of the lovely things that you need to rock up with either online or in a branch, the bank will say no. AML, KYC, all the things that are supposed to stop financial crime are actually barriers to financial inclusion. And so what we're about to do with Aurora is have an engagement process with the regulators, with government, to think about, can we come together to actually properly solve this? Because the technology is there. This is not about technology. This is not actually about how hard it is. This is about values. This is about understanding that technology and actually applying it into a real world to solve real world problems. And that's what Aurora is really about. That's me.
Amazing. And I think the other thing that I understand is the 1.7 billion of unbanked people is actually underrepresented because it looks at the head of the household. So there are other people within the household that aren't counted in that.
It's really scary. I mean, as well, when you look at those numbers, I mean, when you really analyze the numbers that the UNDP put out about the financial inclusion, and also when you go drill into the equality angle for women, the amount of women that don't even get paid for jobs they do, they get paid in kind, is scary. And then the exposure that women have to their manipulation because they are in a cash-based economy is really even, I mean, I was involved in a World Health Innovation Summit around the impact of well-being and access to cash and financial coercive control. And this is the shocking statistics. When you look as well what's happened in the COVID pandemic, specifically to women, it's really, really scary that the system at the moment just isn't set up. There aren't products out there that aren't safe spaces for women to go to get the support that they need. As somebody, as a junior lawyer who spent a long time volunteering in women's refuges and helping with care orders with children and various other aspects, there's a real need to allow those safe spaces in communities to exist and help women and young girls know that they can have financial independence, that they can have financial literacy, and that they can have those skills to be able to get themselves into that position. And that's what we want to do. We want to use our Aurora wallet as that conduit, working with community partners to get those that are the most vulnerable into a space where they can feel like they can take control of their financial destiny, that they don't have to rely on food banks and they don't have to rely on benefits and aid. You can get them to a place, because when you give access to cash, whether it's in real form or digital form, most of the time people end up doing amazing things with that. When you look at also what the future of universal basic income could be for people and the pilots that have happened all around the world, when you give people that access, you see tremendous growth in entrepreneurial development. You see tremendous growth in people being able to do great things in their community. So that's something that we're also very passionate about in Aurora, about making sure people get the things that they are entitled to give them that space, because access to cash and the fear of financial insecurity is a massive mental health crisis that we're going to face in the next decade.
Very much so. And Janna, Victoria's partner in crime.
Yes, so thanks, Bridget. Aside from being Victoria's partner in crime, which I will get onto as well, I am the founder of a consultancy called Markets Evolution, which specializes in financial innovation, regulatory strategy, and market structure, which may sound like seemingly unconnected things, but they actually are quite connected. So my background is entirely in capital markets, and that's where I've been working for about the past 20 years or so. And the major part of my career has actually been in working with large institutions, such as banks, trading venues, and exchanges, and helping them deliver their strategy. So market structure is basically about how different market participants interact, what happens if you change something like introducing a new regulation or something like that, or how do you build up new markets and new products and services that you want to launch? What kind of market participants do you need to engage? What kind of intermediaries do you need, and things like that. And actually, it was about a year and a half ago that it was an afternoon in January last year that I went for a coffee with Victoria. And I remember having a rant to her about how I just read the latest of many really depressing papers, mainly produced by consultancies on the future of capital markets. And I've always been quite passionate about creating financial markets that are fit for purpose for everyone, not just the tiny number of beneficiaries that they actually serve today. So I think capital markets at the moment only serve something like the top 1% of all companies. Everyone else, has to go somewhere else for financing. And that's before you even get to retail consumers and the financially excluded, which Victoria has spoken extensively about already. And so I've been reading all these depressing papers, usually put out by consultancies, about the future of capital markets. And I suppose they're intended to scare clients into, procuring the services of those consultancies. But they all painted a very bleak picture of a future with lower profit margins and lots of what they describe as external pressures. So the external pressures of, climate risk and the pressures of lower margins and things like that. And I said to Victoria, what if we could rethink all this? What if we could, bring together everyone who's working on really exciting technology innovation and financial innovation? What if we could bring that all together and actually paint a really positive future of what capital markets, what financial markets could look like, where we actually could build in the ideas of sustainability and fairness and equity from the ground up. It's not just about having those as sort of annoying bolt-ons that have to be on the side. And here we are, a year and a bit later, kind of doing exactly that, which is really exciting. And so I think my key for me, when traditional financial institutions talk about concepts like sustainability and inclusion, they quite often talk about it within the constraints that they face, the constraints of their existing business models and the constraints imposed on them by the technology that they use. For instance, if you look at green bonds and the issues around greenwashing, being unable to really measure the impact of green or sustainable investments, that's a huge issue at the moment. But what if we could rethink that? What if, if we started from scratch with a fresh piece of paper and designed financial products that were fit for purpose to, had to have not just meet ESG criteria, but to have the actual impact built in from the outset? And what if we then built those using the technology that we have available now, rather than the legacy infrastructure that has all of its constraints? So what if we used DLT, for example, and what if we used smart contracts and tokenization and created digital native financial instruments that had impact measurement built into them from the ground up? And what if those could be linked to the Internet of Things, to real life sensors that were measuring what was going on in real time and, continually updating and revaluing the instruments based on that? That's when you start to see the really transformative potential and the real ability to create financial markets that are fit for purpose, that do serve the needs of the many rather than of the few. So that's what gets me really excited, and that's why I love everything I'm working on at the moment. So both Aurora with Victoria, we're also amongst the originating team behind a new digital pound initiative, which is looking at the case supporting the introduction of a UK central bank digital currency and what that can mean for financial inclusion and sustainability as well. So it's really, I guess my whole career is now transformed to focus on this new area of digital sustainability.
That's amazing, and it's really timely as well. I just saw yesterday in the FT Advisor that there is a gap between the knowledge of financial advisors and ESG issues. And not only is there a gap, but clients are leaving to find advisors who can help with this. Also this week, I saw that in Holland, that the Friends of the Earth and other charities and partners took Shell to court and have won. And Shell is now court mandated to reduce their carbon emissions by 45%, because left to regulation and left on their own, they weren't doing the job.
Right.
So, so it's wonderful to have these conversations and actually seeing you all reimagining what the future should look like and being able to build that. And then Jane, we would love to hear from you as well, because I know this is a huge area for you.
Thank you, Bridget. What an amazing panel. And I don't know how to describe myself, but I feel like I'm just this global cheerleader for all these amazing people that are building these incredible things and then trying to tell their stories in language that the general populace can understand. So I think I'm a cheerleader. I think I'm a diviner of the future, because Bridget, you're right. We are reimagining and recreating the future all around the world as we speak. And then the other thing that I am is a storyteller who tells it in words that people who are plain speaking can understand. So I believe that the pandemic is charging us to have a major rethink of the global economy. What if it's anything, it's a pandemic of inequality, and it has brought into stark reality the issues that we have neglected people, we have neglected the panel, and we have this economic system that drives pursuit of profits, you know, above all else. And we have an opportunity to really redefine that. So what I'd just like to say, hopefully I'll get a second chance and I can talk about some of the things I'm working on and thinking about, is that we really have an opportunity, and we have seen, because the pandemic forced people to shut down, forced people to go digital, forced people to rethink what they were doing, forced people to figure out how they could earn an income when they couldn't actually go out and participate in the cash economy. But now the question that I have for you and for all of us is, how do we do that? Our global institutions have not been great during the pandemic. Many of our governments have not been great during the pandemic. Can we actually now think about the promise of distributed autonomous organizations to be able to address this issue of sustainable finance and create those incentives to be able to get people to participate and to think about, we think about carbon credits and we're blockchaining those and so forth, but why don't we think about women's credits? Why don't we think about poverty credits? Why don't we think about sustainable development goal credits and tokens and so forth? And this technology that has this incredible power, really reimagine how we have those conversations, how we build communities, how we connect people, and how we incentivize people to do the kinds of things that we know matter.
And talking about things that the pandemic did, it definitely lets us know that we are all globally connected, but our local communities are really, really valuable, and SMEs are hugely valuable. So Saoirse, I would love you to introduce yourself. Again, without Joyce and yourself, we wouldn't be here having this incredible discussion.
And indeed you. We all play a part in this. There's a great cross-pollination story across the entire panel here, which started out with Joyce with Bridget in the Bigger Pie back in 2019 for me, where I met Jane, I met Janna, I met Victoria, and Jane introduced me to tokenomics and ecosystem, and Jason, my fellow co-founder, is in the crowd here. We have partners on the panel, Sophie Blackstad and Hive Online, Hugh Bunn is in the audience, Deadline, and many more. It's a great collaboration story here, and I've been with the Bigger Pie since around the same time in 2019, and I am a steering committee member with Joyce, and I'm just delighted to see so many people here, and thank you all for so much of your engagement and support. And all the energy is still here at the end of the week of Blockchain Ireland Week 2021, and we've had so many sessions and conversations, which included Jane in the healthcare panel just the other day, and there's synergy in terms of gaps in systems. And I'm a systems thinker, and rather than been forced to rethink systems that Jane just mentioned, that prompted so many people in COVID, me and so many of us here at the table have been rethinking these systems for years, if not decades. It's 2016 that I got into fintech after working for a decade in financial services. Victoria was a decade in law. Sophie's from a finance background. Janna's from a finance background. It's once you start looking at the gaps in one system, i.e. the monetary system, you see the faults in the economic system, and then in the political and policy system, and then agriculture and the food system comes into it, and that impacts healthcare. So where do you start if you're stuck in the macro, and how do you become relevant, and how do you solve problems? Well, first of all, you study, you research, and then you find people. And you find people through events like this, you find people through social media, through conferences, and word of mouth and referral and introductions. I started speaking with Jason Curry and tokenomics in early last year, and I was just overwhelmed by the amount of work, thought that had been put into the proposition. And I was delighted to join the team as a co-founder at the time. And we've been working in stealth mode for the last year, building systems of systems with a focus on the agricultural food supply chain, starting off with micro farmers and smallholder farmers in Ireland. So for those of you who are outside of Ireland, we've got Asia Pacific, we've got the States, we've got all over the world here today, all across Europe as well. In Ireland, agriculture is one of our most important industries, and we'd be very well known for it across the world. We're seen as a very green economy, but I think you need to look a little bit closer at the numbers. We might be green, but we are very monoculture. We are only 2% of our agricultural industry is organic, and we're quite behind Europe in that front. So this is the problem that we want to solve, and how do we solve it? Now, our government and our Irish Farmers Association put a program together back in 2018 to address the issue of that 2% and how to boost it. And farmers and smallholders and large farmers from across the country were invited to participate, but 75% of applications were rejected because of a biased points system. So it's not that the will isn't there. The will is there, it's just the infrastructure isn't. Sophie's building infrastructure from scratch in Africa. We need to rebuild or restart with the infrastructure that we have. And it's innovators like tokenomics and ecosystems, the teams that I'm part of, and indeed other teams like we have the Origin Chain Networks and Fiona Delaney in Ireland. And we hope to be working with Origin Chain Networks in a few years' time, if not sooner, once our platform is progressed to that level. We have AgriLedger and Jean-Vieve Levalier, who I'm actually on a panel on later this afternoon at a hackathon. There's Cultivati in the USA. There's a Biza network in Spain, which are an insurance platform for smallholder farmers based on blockchain and using Cube satellites to monitor the agricultural crop from space, which is phenomenal. So all of these partners that just fit in different elements. And one of the beauties about blockchain technology and the decentralized finance and the peer-to-peer network world is that we're so accustomed and tuned into working in a different way and working from afar that it just comes completely natural to us. We don't have to meet face to face. We can just continue in business. We just need to know more people that know each other, and that just happens over time. So, as I say, we're addressing the problem of helping SMEs to be digitized through blockchain infrastructure and become more visible in the national infrastructure, contributing towards the sustainable development goals. Again, that's just one industry, agriculture, where 75% of the contributors are invisible because they're not accounted for. And then that has a knock-on effect, because if they're not accounted for their good behaviors, then they're not actually accountable for, or they're not actually visible to financial services, so they can't actually access the funds that are available, particularly from banks, because of their credit processes. So we're looking at green bonds based on blockchain. We're looking at asset tokenization, crowd funds. So much in there. I'm going to hand back over to Bridget because everybody else needs to say more. But please, if you've got specific questions, follow up and we'll have conversations afterwards.
I know we should have a whole conference on this rather than 1 hour. We can't possibly get nearly enough in. One of the things that I've very much noticed is if you're invisible to the system, if there isn't record keeping of you, then your ability to progress to financial empowerment is taken away from you. And that seems to be the story that everyone is sharing. So, Sophie, I'd love to know a little bit more about how you roll out technology where there is no infrastructure, there's no literacy, and there is no technology. And what are the lessons that we can learn from you to be able to apply to the other situations? Because I'm sure, you know, when you're talking about people who, many of the vulnerable people will people who are displaced or who are living in areas where the language isn't their first language. So literacy becomes an issue, not necessarily for them in their first language, but maybe where they're staying.
Yeah, so I have to say, you know, before we started in Africa, we always planned to do Africa. We did actually start with a product in Denmark. And one of the things we learned from the Danish builders, and, you know, this is the most digitized nation on the planet, is that Danish builders don't use their mobile devices much either. So it's not just a developing economy problem. And, you know, as others have mentioned, that the farmers are excluded wherever you are. So first off, how do we tackle it? Well, we've used existing social bonds, and Jane mentioned tokenizing what I call natural and social capital, and that's a big part of it. We use existing structures such as cooperatives and savings groups, which are all over Africa. Cooperatives are the key driver of many African agricultural economies. And we use those structures to enable people who are members of those groups to register, to have identity, and to build up a record of their transactions with the group and also the group's transactions with buyers, so that they can build up both a personal and a group identity. And we do that through measuring financial transactions, but also other kinds of commitments. So, for example, in a savings group, do the women show up to put money in every week? That is a commitment that they make. In a cooperative, we measure their commitments to the cooperative to deliver different types of crops, which in turn also builds up a picture for the whole group about what crops are going to be available. So the buyers can pre-buy the crops, and then there's money going into the system, and the whole thing is much smoother and more transparent, and takes out a lot of the middlemen, which I know is a thing in agriculture wherever you are, where you've got middlemen buying crops at a low price at the farm gate and taking more of the profit from the farmers. So yeah, I mean, for us, you mentioned literacy as a key barrier. So something we do is we exploit the slightly better literacy of the people who are either authority figures or social leaders in these groups, and ask them to enter data on behalf of people who are not literate. But I have to say that even people who are not literate tend to be reasonably numerate. So especially if they're in business, as all of our customers are. So we share the numbers with the people who have some kind of device so that they can check that what's going into the system is accurate and reflects what they've told people. So we do have some checks and balances there as well. And then of course the assets themselves know who they belong to. So we can make sure that they're going to the right people. So for example, in a situation where a cooperative is issuing a voucher for a sapling to a farmer, that farmer doesn't necessarily need a device. They can go to the merchant with their identity and their PIN number, and the merchant can use those, or rather they can log into the merchant's device with those credentials, get their voucher redeemed, and they never have to touch a mobile device at all, and they don't have to own one. So it's complicated and it's not intuitive, but it's something that we've been able to prove works. And we'd be really excited to bring this back to, you know, the global north and places where people are more digitally literate, because I think the opportunities are so much greater.
And when it comes to the communities that you're serving, Victoria and Janna, through Aurora, what are the challenges that you face there?
Well, to pick up on that, I mean, I think the big challenge really is identity, because when you think about money, what is money? Money is its value, its promises and value and trust. I'll do X, you give me Y, and here's some money that's backed up by a central bank to say that this is good. This is a good promise, this has value, okay, and the network has it. So it's really thinking about all of those things and mixing identity, because ultimately identity through your passport or your driver's license, or the things that we think of as identity credentials, give us access to this world of value and promises, and give us access to the things so we can do the things that we want to do. So if we had, for example, a digital identity in the UK, the things that Aurora are trying to do would be tremendously a lot easier. If we had access to real digital financial infrastructure issued by the central bank that was out there for people to innovate on top of, our life would be a lot easier at Aurora. And from my time in Asia, working in Singapore, when I worked for the Development Bank of Singapore, that's what's quite interesting. They're light years ahead in this. When you look at also in India, what's happened in fintech there, because the work that's been done on digital identity, whether there are issues with what they've done, that's really powerful as well, because identity and linking that to the entitlement, you don't necessarily need to know who you are, but you need to know that you have a right to access that. And I think there are some fundamental pillars in the way some of the systems operate at the moment that are preventing that. So it's looking to technology, looking to how we can overcome those, and asking those really hard questions. So when we sat there and thought about developing our wallet, well, if somebody is fleeing domestic abuse and they haven't got the wherewithal to take all of their identity documentation with them when they flee that sector, how do we get them into the system? How can we have somebody that says, I will support you, I will vouch for who you are, and I will trust you? How can we do that? If you're a homeless person and you can't get into the system because you haven't got a permanent address, because you haven't got a job, you haven't got all of these things that is all stacked up to say, I can trust you, then how do you do that? So it's actually, they're the key things for us. And then there's regulatory barriers, because let's be honest, the financial system, the way it is set up to help the big institutions. I used to work in a big institution. I lobbied a lot to keep that way as well. And so there is a real, to get into being able to have reserve accounts, clearing accounts, and all these things that they say you have to be a payments institution or an electronic money issue. They're all there to supposedly deal with the trust and deal with the issues that come with the responsibility of being a financial institution. But actually, there's really clever ways with technology you can show what you're doing. And that's the power of blockchain for me, is the access to the data that can be used to inform that trust and really empower people to think and do things in a different way. With what we've been able to develop, we can show literally from when the donation comes in, how it's allocated by the charity, how that then goes into the wallet, and what people do with the money that's in the wallet. Completely transparent. We had a discussion the other day with a charity that's a food bank, and they were talking about the fact that a local authority didn't know how to distribute money that had been given by central government to the children that should have been fed and had free school meals. Didn't know how to do it. They had absolutely zero way. The schools didn't want to do it. Nobody wanted to do it. Nobody wanted to take ownership. So the local authority just bundled up all the money and gave it to the food bank and said, go and buy some food and you figure it out. You don't need to tell us what you've done with the money. We don't need to know. We trust you. You go out into the community and do it. How is that actually solving the problem? How can we work? And that's ultimately what we want to do. We want to be able to give that transparency and trust and help people figure out how they get access to the things they need, because that's really what we need to do. It's never a technology issue. Technology you can always figure out. It's about the people, it's about getting into the system, it's about knowledge and trust and value.
And whilst you say it's not a technology issue, it is interesting to understand a bit more, maybe Janna, you can speak to this, about what the digitization of assets and tokenization looks like. How are we able to use the technology to replace transparency and get the funds to the right people that we're not able to do with the current system? Can you speak a bit more, Janna, about what that looks like?
Yeah, sure. And I think it can build on what Victoria's already said there. And so as she's mentioned, the biggest obstacle for us has not been the technology. It's been dealing with financial and payments infrastructure that by its very nature creates these problems of financial exclusion. So we're trying to solve a problem of financial inclusion but we've got to go through the same payments infrastructure that is set up to create these and creates these barriers in the first instance, which is really challenging. And we've had to do some seriously creative thinking around how we structure our wallets and what it's actually doing and things like that. And so that comes on to, for example, what the digitization of money can provide for us. To give you one example of a digital asset, and other people have mentioned things like stable coins and central bank digital currency in the chat as well. So I'll pick up on that. With central bank digital currency, again, it's not just about taking the existing infrastructure we have and the existing forms of money we have and just digitizing them, because the problems are really more fundamental than that. The banking and payments infrastructure that we have today kind of grew organically over many decades. And at each stage, it's been limited by not only the current technology constraints, but actually the technology constraints of decades past. So whilst, wheelbarrows of cash are not being exchanged at the end of the day, we have a payments infrastructure in the UK that assumes that wheelbarrows of cash are being exchanged at the end of the day, which introduces all sorts of inefficiencies at every stage. And, opening hours from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. on weekdays only and things like that creates the need for multiple payment systems and types of settlement and reserve account and all kinds of headaches that we've got to work with. Now, the introduction of central bank digital currency gives us an opportunity to reimagine what society needs from money, because money ultimately is not just about enabling the economy, it's enabling society to function. And the economy doesn't work unless you have a functioning society, really. So if we can like, again, take a blank sheet of paper and reimagine what are the requirements that we actually have of money? What are the functions that we need money to perform? And this could be quite wide ranging. So we want money and we want means of transmitting money from between senders and receivers that are financially inclusive. For example, the government may want to ensure that a new payments infrastructure is able to enable better policy delivery, so helicopter money and things like that. There's potential impacts for taxation, which some people get very excited about. It's not really my key area. But there's lots of things that we could want money to do that would help society function more smoothly. And then if we take those requirements and we look at the technology that we have today, we can actually implement something that meets those requirements. And that's the real revolutionary aspect of central bank digital currency and of digital money. enabling you to do things that actually meet the requirements that people have of money, rather than just digitizing the existing type of money we have and taking along all those kind of legacy issues with it.
So Jane, we're clearly talking here about global issues, and you've got the bird's eye view of seeing, you know, and being the storyteller of seeing what's happening. How many times can you see a problem being solved in one area where that solution could be moved across to another area? I mean, I'm thinking about the regulators now. We're becoming so global, the regulators still have borders. But can you talk to the experiences that you've seen where we have seen a solution from one place being put across? Is that happening? You're on mute, darling.
I think that we need to look to the emerging markets for the solutions. The problem that we have is that we're so fettered by our legacy systems and ways of doing things and ways of thinking that it's almost impossible to innovate our way out of it. And if you think about the work, for example, that Sophie's doing, creating alternative credit scores for kind of illiterate communities in some of the poorest nations in the world, we can learn from those experiences, and we can learn from other countries. The top 10 countries, the proportion of the population who own cryptocurrencies, they're all emerging economies. They're Nigeria, they're Indonesia, they're Brazil. They're not England, they're not Australia. And so people are using these digital technologies all around the world in humanitarian settings and in other settings to figure out how to solve their financial inclusion problems. People in the Philippines are surviving by playing a game called Axie Infinity, where they can trade NFT tokens within the game and earn enough money to keep their families in food. The good dollar is allowing anyone in the world to collect good dollars as long as they've got access to mobile technology and build up a bank of good dollars and be able to exchange in the good dollar market. Electronium's doing really interesting things because they're trying to create financial inclusion through the work that they're doing, and they have more than 4 million wallet downloads, mainly in developing countries. They started creating a marketplace through allowing people to get phone credit in exchange for their tokens. Now they've got any task, which means people can sell their skills or whatever they've got on these global marketplaces. The problem we have, and when I say we, the Western world, developed economies, is we've got systems and processes that have been developed over hundreds of years that have served us well. We find it hard to change that for these new technologies. And we really need to change our paradigm and think about how we can learn from emerging economies. My final comment, because here we are, it's the Commonwealth. I know, sorry, Ireland's kind of a bit dodgy in terms of where it sits, but my goodness me, you've got China rolling out the digital yuan to all the Belt and Road countries, and we're sitting here with the Commonwealth with $10.4 trillion in the global economy and 2.4 billion people. Where's the Commonwealth coin? Come on, guys, we can really change this. We can absolutely re-envision the way the global economy works if we have that vision and we have the idea, because the technology is there.
Amazing. And we're almost up with our hour. So Saoirse, can I have some final words for you? And then if we can squeeze in, if you had one ask of each of the panelists, if they had one ask that you could have, that if you had it, that it would really help you to move forward with your projects and your businesses, if we could just quickly go through that. But a few last words from you, Saoirse, and then we'll go back to...
Yeah, there's just so many points that I want to pick up on what everybody has said, but Janna just mentioned something about taxation, and it's not her area. I was never interested in tax until I got involved in blockchain and more recently in cryptocurrency, and interested in what's happening with the money that we pay in taxes and how transparent is it. And especially from a Latin America perspective, since Kraken mentioned earlier, contacts in Brazil who are really looking at this because there's a lot of corruption and bureaucracy. We only see the big numbers. Where's the rest of it? what's happening. So I'm just enthralled to learn more about that. But in terms of the SME side, what we've seen throughout the last year and a half is the focus on our essential economies everywhere, SMEs, and it has not been on SMEs for the last number of decades. We have been focusing on multinationals, international companies coming into our countries, focusing on them, funding them. And also then through our education systems, we've been prepping everybody to work in multinationals. And our essential economies and our family businesses everywhere have been completely neglected. Technology professionals have not been building tech to support them. And now look at where we are just within the space of a year, all of the people coming forward to address this global issue, because if we don't support our SMEs, and we don't build the technologies to help them digitize and to access infrastructure, to be visible, then it's a humanitarian issue, because it's the people behind them that are all of us. So I'm so happy to be collaborating across this collective here, and I'm amazed by the amount of questions that's coming in. Roisin and Barry, you've taken over. You should have a podcast. But I'm going to hand back over to Bridget, because obviously you want your last question, but also we have our minister's address coming up. So stay online, everybody.
Very much so. And the panel is in a group. So if you want to fire Q&A into the chat, we won't have time for it now, but we do have you registered for this. So we will follow up with the recording, and then we'll do some answers to the Qs that we haven't had a chance to address today. So quick fire, because we're on the hour. Sophie, if you had one thing, one resource, one whatever it might be, what would it be?
So, yeah, I mean, for me, it's just about speed, getting out there quicker. I just posted about the global threat of Facebook and between them, which is likely to propose a systemic risk to economies, especially in Africa, which have less stable currencies. So for me, speed is of the essence, and in order to do that, we just need to get out there quicker, and that means money. So
Money, right?
money for me. Yeah.
It's a resource. It's great.
Like education and reimagining. People do not understand what is happening in the world now, and I mean governments and international organisations and the general population.
Amazing. Thank you, Victoria.
Yeah.
It's money. It's money at the heart of everything. Reimagining systems, getting people to understand how you can do things differently is not a cheap business. So for me, it's about getting investment into the hands of people like myself and other women and other entrepreneurs that need to change it, because there is something critically broken with venture capital and how it works.
Yes.
And there is a distinct lack of patient capital that is purpose and mission driven. And that needs to flow to people.
Yeah, I'm very impressed with the work that Acumen do, but we need much more than just Acumen there. Saoirse.
Well, I'm going to repeat exactly what the ladies have said in terms of funders need projects and projects need funders. And it's not just in the green space, it's in the diversity space. So we need more clarity there. We're certainly here, we're at the table. So funders, come forward and ask your questions.
Janna?
First, I want to apologise to Saoirse for being flippant about tax. When I said that it wasn't my area, I do fully appreciate that a well-designed CBDC that allowed for taxation at the point of transaction could actually be hugely helpful in reducing corporate tax evasion and things like that, and making sure that tax is collected where it needs to be collected. But what would I wish for? It's better education and understanding. Again, I think both policymakers and investors. Policymakers need to understand the opportunities that are available through digitization of creation of digital native financial infrastructure, should I say, because it's not good enough just to be digitized, it's got to be digital native. And the opportunities of this, and investors as well need to stop focusing on the kind of 10x scenario and the short-term profits. And as Victoria said, We need more patient capital and more investors using their money and targeting it to impact.
Very much so. We have just gone a couple of minutes over, so we're now going to, so thank you everyone for the entire week. There have been incredible sessions, everyone who has shown up today, everyone on our panels. We will hang on, so we're going to listen to the address from the Minister, but we will be here when we come back, so I'll just put that on now.
Good morning all, and congratulations to you and your team for organising such a comprehensive and wide-ranging event on what is a fascinating subject and one that is of interest to many people and policymakers. The programme of virtual events has raised some crucial themes in the areas as diverse as the security of data and supply chains, the role of the EU Commission in fostering innovation, to the inclusive development agenda, and the way technology is changing the relationships that artists have with their work in this digital age. Running throughout has been the issue of trust and how blockchain has distributed ledger technologies are emerging as the foundations for the development of new services and applications. As Minister at the Department of Finance with responsibility for financial services, these issues are of strategic importance for the future development of our economy. My team at the department has been following this area closely and look forward to continuing to work with Blockchain Ireland through the action plan for our Ireland for Finance strategy. The Ireland for Finance strategy is a partnership between the state and the industry and has technology and innovation as one of its key pillars. The strategy recognises that Ireland is uniquely positioned to benefit from the massive global investment in fintech and disruptive technologies like blockchain. This is due in part to our excellent track record in attracting foreign direct investment, our entrepreneurial culture, and their unique cluster of IFS and technology firms. We are one of very few global locations with a proven record of accomplishment in the financial services and technology arena. In addition to being a committed English-speaking member of the EU and the EU single market, Ireland has access to talent from both the EU and the common travel area, and our ecosystem is underpinned, I should say, by a strong, fully independent financial services regulator in the Central Bank of Ireland. Among the deliberate actions in this year's Ireland for Finance Action Plan is the establishment of a new fintech group here in the Department of Finance. This is an extension of our commitment to leadership in continuing change in our international financial services sector. Our main priorities for this new group are, number one, making an active and significant contribution to the development of EU policy and legislation to foster real innovation in fintech while protecting consumers against risks. Number two, orchestrating and coordinating the activities of all relevant public and private bodies under Ireland for Finance. And three, conducting outreach to various industry firms, from startups to incumbents to big techs who provide financial services by digital means, and industry representative bodies to understand their needs and business models and how the EU can provide an ecosystem for them to grow. Part of our reason for developing our new fintech group is to ensure alignment with new EU digital finance package published in September 2020, which sets out general lines of how Europe can support the digital transformation of finance in the coming years while regulating its risks. The strategy sets out four main priorities: removing fragmentation in the digital single market, adapting the EU regulatory framework to facilitate digital innovation, promoting a data-driven finance, and addressing the challenges and risks with digital transformation, including enhancing the digital operational resilience of the financial system and testing markets for crypto assets. As digital finance accelerates cross-border operations, it also has the potential to enhance financial market integration in the banking union and the capital markets union, and in the process strengthen Europe's economic and monetary union. Blockchain, as your programme events has so clearly demonstrated, promises decentralized and real-time mechanisms for enabling, storing, and securing database transactions while allowing greater direct connection between intermediaries. We see a strong future for Ireland as a leading European home for global innovation labs and fintech, where the potential of disruptive technologies can be harnessed for the benefit of all citizens. The pandemic has shown us all a glimpse of the future and new economics emerging, one that is built on technology and is conscious of the environment and the resources needed to power the future. During the pandemic, we have all seen how much it is possible in financial services due to the innovative technologies, and the event this week show that there is yet more potential. In conclusion, I would like to thank you once again for this opportunity to participate in the programme and to say that I am looking forward to engaging with you and the team through Ireland for Finance as we look to develop the potential of this exciting technology. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you indeed. And Joyce, final words for you about how the citizens of Ireland can actually help participate and shape what that might look like? You're still on mute.
Yeah. Could I just say first, this was such an inspiration. And thank you all very much, Bridget, yourself, Janna, Victoria, Sophie, Jane, and Saoirse, because you've set a vision for the future. And I'll come to the Minister in a minute, but it is about identifying problems, creating solutions, and reinventing the future. It is about reinventing the future, getting the discussion going. So I'm really, in terms of the actions that you talked about, it was investment with a purpose. It was about education. And it was also about values, changing values and understanding the system. So what's the challenge for all of us? But you asked about the Minister. The Minister, I think, presentation gave us great hope because he talked about there's more potential, more understanding. And we have a structure to Ireland for the financial strategy to input. So I think our challenge is to educate, is to create awareness, is to bring these ideas into the mainstream and to get the opportunity to meet policymakers, politicians, but the whole public to understand the power they have as citizens to control their own future. Money is central to that. We heard last week or during the week of Jane on healthcare. It is about owning your own data. It's owning your own money and having a success to that. So what I see today has been the beginning of a conversation, and we've certainly through BlockW and with the bigger pie create other opportunities to have this discussion. I like the idea of storytelling, Jane. I think that's really important. And all of you have amazing stories to tell because you've done it. We have one very amazing Irish company now that's based in Singapore. I don't know if you've come across them, ATech, and they do exactly what you're doing. They're working on ethnic identity or digital identity and financial, the financial inclusion. But they're working in Singapore. What we need is to bring all your knowledge back, not just to the Commonwealth, Jane, but to Europe and Ireland, because I think that's what we have in common are those values and the importance of changing the system. So thank you all so much. It's been a great pleasure. And thanks to all the participants, it's been great interaction. So thank you very much again, and we'll see you soon.
And thank you. Can I just end on one last note? What I love about this technology, and it's a phrase that was shared with me last week, and I want to share with you, is it allows us to have radical responsibility of what we imagine and how we build it. So I encourage all of you to take up the mantle. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
And just a huge thank you to the Blockchain Ireland team, and in particular Amber and Marzena, who are on the call here. Your responsiveness, your professionalism, and your warmth through the entire session, night, noon, and day, since Monday and in the weeks beforehand, has been incredible. So bravo to you. To all the silent people in the background, your voice is heard.
I'd come in there. I've got emails at 11 o'clock at night from Marzina and 7 o'clock in the morning. So well done, ladies. You are absolutely the backbone and the drivers of Blockchain Ireland Week. So well done, and thank you very much. And of course to the guys, Paul and Dara as well. Bye now. Thank you.